Welcome to You Not Crazy Conversations of Hope podcast. We are on episode 7 today. If you've been with me so far in this season, thank you. So today, our topic is from disappointment to trust. We're going to talk about the journey of building trust after disappointment and how distrust can really impact our relationships as well as the relationship with ourselves. So let's talk about it. So what is trust? All right. So trust is the firm belief in the reliability, truth, and ability of someone or something. Listen, I have trust that this couch is going to keep me safe when I sit down. All right. But trust is knowing that this couch is going to keep me safe. But distrust is the opposite of that, meaning I don't know if this someone is going to keep me safe. So when I don't know or have that reliability that someone is going to keep me safe, it leads to distrust, and distrust ultimately leads to disappointment. And when I had enough experiences of being disappointed by people who I cannot trust to keep me safe, then ultimately I just have this sense of distrust. I take this sense of distrust into my friendships, to my relationships. All right. So a lot of times we don't know that we have developed the trait of distrusting individuals. But I want to talk about how that can manifest. So distrust can manifest as insecurity. All right. So meaning when I go around people, they say, "Hey, I heard that you can sing," right? But if I had an experience before where I tried to sing and someone didn't manage it well and created emotional dissafety for me, I now may go into this new friend group and they say, "Hey, you should sing." I'm probably not going to sing because I distrust that people are going to manage what I do share. They're going to mismanage what I do share, right? So it can show up as insecurity. Distrust can show up as fear. So if I've been disappointed a lot because I can't trust people to show up in the way I need them to, it shows up as fear. So it may look like for an individual, meaning the fear to try new things, the fear of letting themselves be vulnerable in a new friend group, especially if being vulnerable in a friend group before was not managed well and caused me not to trust myself or others. Then when I go into this new friend group, I'm going to have a fear of being open and vulnerable. All right. And ultimately, distrust can create barriers in our relationships. So in our friendships and in our intimate relationships. So I want to talk a little bit about how distrust really does impact our well-being, why it's so important to begin to do the work towards building trust for yourself and with others. Right? So it even impacts our brain. I want to kind of share the connection of distrust and our brain. So in our systems, we have different pieces of our brain that does different functioning. And one of the particular parts of our brain is called the amygdala. Okay, so the amygdala is it's a part of our brain that has a central role in processing our emotions. It is also known to cause certain responses to stress, whether in fight or flight or freeze. And so what happens is if I have experienced situations where distrust happen, it heightens my amygdala to the point where it becomes sensitive or vigilant or hypervigilant to perceived threats of distrust. So now it creates this pattern within my brain that I'm looking now that other people are going to be distrustful because of past experiences. So in a sense, it creates this pattern, or what we call this neural pathway connection within my brain, that anytime I sense something where someone is maybe not being honest or open, I now connect that to distrust, and now that part of my brain is on alert, and now I'm immediately going, I can't trust this person here, right? So ultimately, when I have multiple experiences of distrust, it really impacts my mental well-being, because ultimately, if my amygdala is constantly being alerted, then there's a part that once that alert comes on, it releases a chemical called cortisol. Now, cortisol was designed to be released to give us that adrenaline to manage things that would be considered threatening to us, right? And so it's this extreme high that we get the motivation to do what we need to do. For example, my cortisol comes on really, really fast when I see a frog. It gives me some type of strength to do what I need to do. In my case, I freeze. So it's producing all this, and it's like, move, get away from the frog. Whatever the case, I don't move. But anyways, back to what I was saying. Ultimately, when I keep experiencing these experiences with people that have caused distress within me and in the connection relationship, that part of the brain continues to keep being activated. So that cortisol is being released. The issue with cortisol is too much cortisol becomes chronic in the long term, and ultimately can impact my immune system. So this is where we get autoimmune diseases. This is where we get hypertension or high blood pressure. That is because this cortisol is impacting or different parts of our bodies, and it is in a sense attacking our immune system, because if it's constantly being on, that is what we call chronic stress. So ultimately, distrust long-term can cause physical ailments within our system. So it's very important that we address distrust, because if we don't, we'll continue to show up in our relationships with distress, as well as activate this part within our brain, which releases cortisol, which impacts our immune system. So I hope you get my drift here, that we have to address distrust. So it really impacts us overall. What I also recognize that distrust really impacts how we see ourselves. So not only is it impacting how we show up in relationships and that hypervigilance when we're connecting with others, where we're like, is this person going to be trustworthy? No, I ain't going to trust it. I'm going to put one foot in, one foot out the relationship, because people can't be trusted. But ultimately, it really impacts our relationship with ourselves. So if you're like, sis, I'm not really ready to address distrust because people just do not seem to be trusting. Okay, it's a step-by-step process. We can work with that. But I really need you to see how it really impacts your relationship with yourself. So when I have distrust, one of the impacts of distrust within myself is the internalization. I internalize situations to such a degree that suspicion that I have towards others begin to be suspicions that I have towards myself. So now I may be questioning, I can't even discover people who are trustworthy. Something's wrong with me. And then that spirals into, okay, something's wrong with me. Maybe I'm inadequate. Maybe I'm not worthy. Maybe it's me. So distrust causes that internalization, and too much internalization causes me to question my decision-making skills. It impacts my impulses, right? So I am impulsive and reactive. So ultimately, distrust can really impact how I connect with myself. Because if I can't trust myself, am I really going to want to pursue my dreams and my goals? Or am I really going to put myself out there to network? No, because I am not trusting that I'm capable of doing certain things, because past situation, experience, and events have caused me not to trust others. So then I internalize that towards myself, and it makes me more reluctant to try things, to do things, right? So we want to address how to really deal with that distrust, because yes, it impacts how we see others in our relationships, but it also impacts how we see ourselves. So what are some things that you can do to begin to rebuilding trust? Well, first, I definitely want to talk about how trust is built. Usually I use this analogy where when you start a relationship with the bank, okay, so you and the bank, have a connection, call an appointment, okay. At this appointment, the bank is listing their terms and conditions, and you read the terms and conditions, but you also have your own terms and conditions, because you're ultimately selecting the bank that may benefit you long term. So both parties come to the table with something. So usually with the bank, they ask you to make a deposit. And based upon how you manage that deposit determines how the relationship gets extended. So if I'm making a deposit and I'm managing that deposit well, the bank extends my relationship with them. So now they may offer me more, whether it's credit cards, loans. So they're out there offering me more because they want to extend the relationship. Right? And then if I manage those things well, they extend it a little bit further. So now I'm going deeper in my connection, and they may give me more access to them as a bank. So now I may be able to have a deposit box, or I may be able to get certain things that only if I've been managing it well gives me access to. That is how we build trust. Okay, so I want to build trust in my relationships with people by allowing them to make deposits, and I make deposits. And based upon how the management of those deposits go, then there's an extension of access. All right. So I don't want to give people full access if they haven't made deposits and been managing, if they haven't managed the deposits I've made the correct way. So I have to now know how to build trust in order to deal with the distrust I had before. So I need to know that I have to have what we consider is emotional and relational intelligence. So again, you can't give people full access if they haven't managed the deposits well. Another step towards overcoming distrust and moving towards trusting others and yourself also includes forgiveness. Okay, so let's be honest, we're human. We all make mistakes. No one's perfect. There are days we have good days, and there are times when we will have bad days. And so on our bad days, we may not show up as our best self. And because of that, we may cause an offense. We may hurt someone with our words or our actions. All right. So no one's perfect. And so there should be a measure of grace that we extend others for the times that they've caused pain or hurt towards us. Now, I'm not saying if someone is continually hurting you over and over and over, because hurt people, I'm not saying continue to give them a chance, but I'm saying forgive them, meaning release them from the thing that they did that hurt you, and set boundaries and begin rebuilding trust in the healthy way. But I have to forgive them first in order to allow them to have access and start the process of trust building with me. So I have to forgive them. I also have to forgive myself. So if I've done things in the past that I know that was not the best for myself, I have to forgive myself, because again, distrust really impacts how we see ourselves and how we connect with others, but I have to also send that forgiveness to myself. If I made mistakes, if I chose people without the knowledge that they were not safe or good people, then I have to forgive myself. One of the affirmations I give my clients all the time is, I did the best that I could with what I knew to do. Meaning, the time that I made my mistakes and errors, I was doing the best that I could. But as I grow and develop in my personal journey, then once I know better, then I do better. So I can't fault myself for things that I did wrong in the past that got me to those particular points or situations. So I have to forgive myself. Again, when I know better, I do better. All right. So ultimately, forgiveness is a big part of rebuilding trust within ourselves and with others. So I have to forgive, and then I have to really start the process of proper management. So again, if someone makes a deposit in my life, I need to manage it well. If I make a deposit in their life, I have to see if they're managing it well. And based upon that management, that allows more access. All right. So with that being said, I definitely believe that it's important to cultivate the ability of proper management. So again, I can't really develop my relationships if it's not being managed well. And so one thing I want to add to that, if you're in a relationship and in your relationship, distrust happened in your journey in that relationship. Let's say it happened one time or two, let's say, and you guys talked about it, right? You have to give each other a clean slate if you really want to continue in the relationship, because again, we're human, we make mistakes, but I want you to consider, though, if you're in a relationship where there's someone who is continuing to make the same mistake, I want you to consider this quote that says, love is conditional, but love can be unconditional, but relational access is conditional. What does that mean? If someone has broken my trust before and they haven't done the things to manage the other deposits well, and we talked about it, and it's still the same pattern over and over and over, my love for them can be unconditional, but the access I give them is based upon conditions. And I think that's key in building trust. People have to meet the conditions that you set for them, because trust is based upon consistency. It is based upon a sense of safety and security, reliability. So if they're not meeting these conditions, how can you really say that you trust them? And why give them more relational access? All right. So just something I want you to keep in mind, that, again, love is unconditional, but relational access is conditional. All right. So with that being said, I want you to focus on, now that you have some tools to focus on nurturing healthy relationships. All right. So again, if you've been in a relationship that distrust came, whether it's in friendships, whether it's with dynamics with parents, whether it's in your intimate relationships, after you guys have did some self-reflection, you guys have forgiven each other, you guys kind of talked about your limitations and the deposits that are going to be made, and management begins to happen, then we want to focus on how to nurture healthy relationships. All right. So that includes open communication. We have to talk. All right. Empathy. That means I have to work on being more understanding. Healthy relationships are also nurtured through transparency. I have to be honest. If I don't like that one thing that you do, I'm going to be honest. I don't like it, right? Because I also want to be authentic. I want to be true to who I am, what I need, what I desire. I also want you all to focus on being patient and understanding. All right. So when distrust happens in relationships, if it's repairable, listen, it's going to take patience. It's going to take understanding. All right. You guys didn't get to this point overnight. And so it's going to take some time and some consistency and some reliability to reestablish trust in those relationships. So patience and understanding is key. And And one last tip I would say, avoid imposing your will on others. If I want to nurture a healthy relationship, I may have expectations of these people in my relationship, whether it's parents, friends, partners, but I want to be mindful not to impose control to the way where I'm asking them to show up this way, and that's just not who they are, right? What we want to make sure we do is that we don't take people's will from them. We want to make sure that if they want to rebuild and reestablish the trust within a relationship, that we allow them to be who they are and not impose our will on them. Just something I want you to keep in mind. So I want to mention this quick takeaway. So again, distrust, again, can impact our relationships with others and ourselves. And ultimately, in order for us to take the journey towards rebuilding trust with others and ourselves after multiple disappointing experiences, we have to be reflective, we have to be forgiving, we have to offer compassion, we have to offer more transparent communication. So I want to leave you with this takeaway. Embrace the journey of rebuilding trust with patience, resilience, and an open heart. Like a fragile seed planted in the soil of understanding, trust grows slowly, nurtured by the gentle rain of compassion and the warm sunlight of sincerity. With each step forward, let resiliency guide your path, knowing that healing takes time, but every effort brings you closer to the blossoming of authentic connection. And here's the question to leave you. What particular actions or behaviors have you taken to nurture trust in your relationships? Well, I thank you for taking the time to listen, and I hope that you took away some insights on how to reestablish trust so that you're not hypervigilant and looking for distrust in your relationships with others and yourself. Thank you for tuning in. Well, thank you so much for tuning into this episode. I really hope that you took something away. Listen, we don't have time for us to walk around being so hyper-vigilant about people being distrusting, because that can limit us from the connections that we need to make with others and even the connections we need to make with ourselves in our growth and journey process. So I hope that you took some insights away. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Please share. You never know who needs this conversation, and hope that this conversation will bring them hope and insight to make the changes that they need to make so that they're more intentional about their mental well-being. So thank you for tuning in, and I will see you guys next time.